Hello, my name is Rob and I'm from Team Hope. I want to spend some time in this presentation talking to you about what is arguably the world's most famous painting, the Mona Lisa. But before we get underway proper, I want to share two things that are not all that well known. Now, this facsimile, which is, we admit, not very good quality, but the reason that we've got it on for you to have a look at is it's the actual size of the painting itself. Some people think it's a very big painting, that is the size of it. The other thing that's not all that well known is it's not painted on canvas, it's painted on a board. So that being said, let's have some thinking about this great painting. Well, this painting was done by arguably the world's greatest artist, Leonardo da Vinci. It took him in the main 3 years, from 1503 to about 1506, although there is some evidence that he was still working on it in 1517. Who was the woman? Probably a lady by the name of Lisa Gherardini. She was the wife of a wealthy businessman who commissioned the painting. Mona is a very old Italian word meaning madam or my lady, a title of respect, the Mona Lisa. In 1518, the painting was purchased by King Francois of France. Later, Napoleon got hold of it, as he got hold of quite a few things, and it ended up in his bedroom for a few years. 1797, it was moved to the Louvre Art Museum in Paris, which is its current location today. As we mentioned, it's not painted on canvas, but on a wood panel made of white poplar wood. Measures 77 centimetres by 53 centimetres, the size of the mock-up that we showed you earlier. Current valuation is put at $1 billion, but the simple truth is it's not for sale, it's genuinely priceless. It can be viewed at the Louvre today. In 2019, the gallery it was in was shut for renovations, and then we had the COVID social distancing and numbers dropped to about 7,000 a day. Now it's back to normal, about 30,000 people every day come through to view the picture. Now you can't view it at your leisure. The average viewing time is only a minute. It's in a climate controlled environment, 18 to 23 degrees centigrade, or Celsius as we say in Australia. And for the past few years it's behind thick bulletproof glass. Now it has an interesting history. On the 21st of August in 1911 it was stolen. There was obviously an intense investigation. It was missing for over 2 years. The thief was caught. It was actually a man who worked at the Louvre. It was returned. Up to that point it was relatively unknown, but since that time it has become quite famous, and there have been at least 5 vandalism attacks on the painting. Seems incredible, but it's true. In 1956, the first one occurred when someone hurled a bottle of acid at it. It hit the lower part of the painting. It was able to be repaired. The reason why he did it, we don't know. But thereafter, it became enclosed in glass. In 1956, a guy threw a rock at it. And so hard was the throw that it actually fractured the glass and caused some slight damage to the painting. Now, I don't know why people do these things, and he was asked why did he do it, and he said, well, I had a rock in my pocket and I felt like throwing it. Well, yeah, I guess he wouldn't get a job for NASA. In 1974, when the painting was on tour in Japan, a woman sprayed red paint on it, which was actually on the glass. The reason she did it was a political reason, and we simply don't comment, give anything airplay that uses vandalism to make its point. In 2009, a guy threw a teacup at it. Now, by now, the glass was thick, bulletproof glass, and the only damage that was done was the teacup was broken. That also was done for a political reason. In 2022, a guy disguised as an old woman in a wheelchair got close to the guardrail. Everyone was thinking they were doing the right thing, and if you look at the picture behind me, you can see the guardrail. He jumped out of the chair, leapt over the rail, and smeared cream cake on it. Again, it was for a political reason, which we're not going to talk about. There has been a report of an attempted razor attack. That was apparently foiled beforehand. Now you can have a look. We've got a lovely picture of her now. There she is, the greatest work of art in the history of the world. Da Vinci was a genius, and he worked on it for years. He was one of the very few people on this planet that could even come close to painting something so remarkable. It's so amazing. But here's the thing. The 5 people who attempted to destroy it had no talent whatsoever. Now there's a simple principle here, and I think we need to look at it. It takes skill, hard work, and dedication to create something. It takes absolutely no skill or talent to destroy it. Stop a moment and think about how things are being destroyed around us all the time. Vandalism and arson are 2 examples. Many of our bushfires are deliberately lit. You know, you have a small town in the mountains that can take so much hard work and time to build up a community and talent and commitment. It takes no skill at all for an artist to destroy it. Just one tiny spark will do it. But what about when people get hurt and people get destroyed? I mean, there's things, drugs and drink driving and things like that. There is a thing, though, of great power that gets used to abuse and destroy all the time. In fact, it probably does more damage to people than any other thing I can think of. That thing is the tongue, the mouth. Now we know about the COVID pandemic, but there's another pandemic going on, and it's a pandemic of bullying. Lives are being destroyed by destructive words. It doesn't take any talent to destroy a life. With harsh words, we can reduce someone to a disaster. Or, with the same tongue, the same mouth, we can use words to build people up. The Bible has some things to say about this. In the book of James it says the tongue is very small and yet it can do so much harm. It compares the tongue to a small spark. Something so small can set off a huge forest fire. We call them bushfires in Australia, and we know all about them. And it only takes one spark, one tiny thing to do so much damage. And the Bible says the tongue is small, but it can do so much damage. And it comes down to a choice. How are we going to use our tongue? Can we use it to destroy? Or we can use it to heal and build up. We can be destroyers or builders. In the Bible, the book of Proverbs says a kind word turns back furious rage, but a harsh, angry word causes painful sorrow. It's our call. We're surrounded by destruction. We're living in a world filled with it. I was driving my grandkids home one night and we were talking about the war in Ukraine, and we were discussing what a tragedy it is and how it had to come back to one man using his mouth to lead the whole region into a state of war. And we were thankful that it was on that other side of the world to where we were having a discussion in my car. And then right in front of us, this guy walks across in front of an oncoming car. The car slams its brakes on, and the guy puts his window down and starts screaming the most foul abuse at the guy who walked across in front of him. And the guy who walked across in front of him turns around and he starts shouting back at him, and there's this great shouting match going on in front of us. And my grandchildren realised, as I did, that this aspect of human nature is all around us. I want to encourage you as you're watching this to be a life builder, someone who encourages and builds up others. Yep, it's harder to do that than it is to destroy people, but the world needs encouragers, especially now. How about it? Could you, as a result of watching me now, decide to be, I'm going to become an encourager? There's a guy in the Bible who's one of my heroes. His name is Barnabas. That name means son of encouragement. This guy really shows us the power of encouragement. Now, one of the most exciting things, books you can read in the Bible is the book of Acts. And I've heard people say the Bible's boring, or they could never have read the book of Acts. It's just gripping what those early leaders went through. It describes how the church burst into the world scene, and when you consider the political forces and the terrible violence that was unleashed on the church, it should never have survived, but it did. In fact, it flourished. When Jesus lived, the Jewish leadership was strongly against him. Actually, they hated him. Probably because he wouldn't play by their rules. Probably because he was the people's king. People were following Jesus instead of following them. They were losing control. Now, I need to say something important here. This is very important. This is not a reflection of all Jewish leadership. It relates to the key leaders who were in power at that time. Not all Jewish leadership is like that, that's for sure. All organisations, I'm going to include the Christian church, have issues with problematic leaders during their history. Anyway, we bring that back to when Jesus, if they thought they could fix the problem by executing Jesus, he ruined their plans because he rose from the dead. After his resurrection, they regrouped. They went after the church big time. It was a dangerous time for Christians and a very dangerous time for the church. This was where Barnabas was a leader. He wasn't living on Easy Street. He was a church leader in tough times. So, enter into the situation is this young guy, his name was Saul. And he was a Pharisee, which was one of the strict sections of Judaism at that time. Described himself as a Hebrew of Hebrews, of the tribe of Benjamin. He was also the hatchet man for the leadership at that time. He was a very dangerous young man. Christians were very afraid of him. A lot of them ended up in prison. I guess a lot of them died there. He was a dangerous guy. So one day he's on the road to a place called Damascus, and he's going there to arrest some more Christians, and this incredible event occurs. Perhaps it was a portal that opened up between heaven and earth, but a light fell on him, and there were strange encounters and sounds, and he had a face-to-face with God himself. This portal between heaven and earth opened up a conversation between Jesus and Saul. And that changed the entire course of human history. Saul, the young radical firebrand, was radically changed. Jesus challenged Saul about his treatment of the church. See, if you hurt the church, you hurt Jesus. Then Jesus said, Saul, I want you to go to Damascus. Man there's going to help you. Problem was, this impact of this portal opening, he was blind, he couldn't see, he was shaken, he was blind. So they led him into Damascus, and he was never the same again. He was very unique. He was born a Jew, educated by Greeks, and he was a Roman citizen. What an asset to the church, except everybody in the church was petrified of him. And I can understand that. He was responsible for so much heartbreak and so much pain. But it was Barnabas, the encourager, went to the church and he said, you've got to look beyond your fear. He told the leaders about what had happened on the Damascus Road and about Paul's preaching that he'd heard since then and the great risk he'd taken himself to stand up for Christ. So in the end, Barnabas took Saul to the leadership of the church. Sometimes encouragers have to stand up with someone who's unpopular. And I think a classic example in our culture are bully victims, discrimination victims, or someone like Saul. They've done the wrong thing and want to make a go of doing the right thing, and people don't believe it. Encouragers would rather do the right thing instead of doing the popular thing. Saul was accepted into the church and proceeded to change the world because Barnabas the encourager stuck up for him and took him into the leadership of the church. Later, Barnabas was asked to go to Antioch. There had been violent persecution against the church. Barnabas was sent into the thick of it. And it wasn't like he was sent to the Gold Coast and asked to lay on the beach and think happy thoughts about God. He was sent into a very dangerous and violent situation. So he goes to Antioch, he arrives there. Luke, the historian who recorded the book of Acts for us, said this about his arrival, and I'm quoting, "When Barnabas arrived and saw the evidence of the grace of God, he was glad and encouraged them to remain true to the Lord with all their hearts. He was a good man, full of the Holy Spirit and faith, and a great number of people were brought to the Lord." Now, he wasn't preaching on easy street as we've reflected. He was sent into a pressure situation. That's what encouragers do. His character was his asset. Saul and Barnabas began to work together. Saul was renamed Paul. Saul was his Hebrew name. Paul was the Roman name. He became known as the Apostle Paul. And Paul and Barnabas formed a very powerful team. Over a year they worked together. Many discovered the reality of Jesus through the two of them. Encouragers are team players. You know, at Team Hope, we have a statement that is always hope for the right thing, but never hope alone. So in these times that were hard and dangerous, where they were targeted by violent anti-Christian forces, they were even ejected from towns and communities, but they didn't give up. That's another thing encouragers do. When resolution doesn't come quickly, and life is like that, they keep at it. They keep on saying, come on, you can do this, don't give up. Paul became the dominant leader. Barnabas wasn't threatened by that. Encouragers who know who they are and what they can do, they don't need official leadership position. They just encourage. It's endemic in their nature. Now we're about to see that the Bible is a real book about real people that addresses real issues. Paul and Barnabas had a disagreement, an argument. It was over a young guy called John Mark. Now remember, the climate I'm explaining and describing to you was a dangerous climate. John Mark had been on the team, but he dropped out under pressure that the church was under. He couldn't deal with it. Barnabas wanted him in the team for the next stage of the mission, but Paul didn't. I think that's a bit harsh of Paul. When he was given a chance, is there different rules for this guy? Well, there's some things we need to understand. Paul had become a focused leader in the church. He was convinced that Jesus was the only hope for humanity. and what the Lord had done on the cross. That was the only way that people could be saved from despair. There was something else that bothered Paul about John Mark. In these dangerous days, someone who let the team down could actually cost lives. So Paul was focused on protecting the church and its mission. Barnabas was focused on encouraging. They couldn't resolve it, so they parted company. Barnabas took John Mark with him and continued in their work. It worked out better anyway because one mission became two. Paul had to be tough. He succeeded and truly did reach the world. If he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't be talking to you now. And Barnabas, well, he just can't turn encouragers off. Paul was eventually arrested and taken to Rome. Historians believe he probably died under the violent rule of Nero. We've got a copy of the final document he wrote. We know it in the New Testament as 2 Timothy. He wrote 2 letters to his young protege Timothy, and this was the second one, was the last thing he wrote. Now he was at that time in a rat-infested dungeon in chains. There would have been cockroaches and fleas and vermin. He knew he was soon to die. Nero was running things in Rome, and he did not challenge Rome, and Paul did. So in this letter he writes to young Timothy, he asked him, just right near the end, you almost could miss it. He asked young Timothy to bring the cloak and some scrolls and parchments when he came to visit Paul in prison. It's right at the end, and you almost miss this. And he asked Timothy to bring John Mark with him. He said that John Mark would be a great help in the ministry. Do you see what happened here as time went past? Paul wouldn't have him on the team, but the encourager had actually won him over. The tough leader had been won over by the encourager. The world recognises it was the Apostle Paul who took the gospel beyond Israel to the whole world. I wonder if he could have pulled it off without a man called Barnabas. Encouragement, well, yes, sometimes it does have a cost to it, but a lot of the time it doesn't. A smile, encouraging word, a phone call, and if there's a cost, why not pay it? That's what encouragers do. I believe the world desperately needs your encouragement. Now, I actually wrote a song about this, and we're going to release it soon on our music section, which will come later. It's a song about the Mona Lisa. It's about Da Vinci. It's about the people who tried to destroy his wonderful work. It's called The Lady, because I believe it's easy to destroy, but it's hard to encourage. My name's Rob. I like you to think about these things.